What's up, everybody? Welcome to We Have Cool Friends, the cool show. We interview our cool friends about the cool things they're doing. I'm Greg, and this is my cool friend, Geoff Keighley. Hello, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, hi. What's up, Greg? How you doing?
Not much. Oh, no, just same old thing, hanging out, talking about video games, talking to my cool friend, Geoff Keighley.
Well, it's nice to be on We Have Cool Friends. We've been trying to do this for a while.
I know. And look at you, big time me. I had to go through your PR company for the Game Awards. Come on, sir.
Stop.
After everything, I was going to say I've done for you, but it's really you've done for me, because the Game Award was pretty huge for my career and kind of funny. So thank you for that.
Hey, you were, our trending gamer in 2015, I think, right?
Yeah, that's right. Look at you. Look at the memory on you. Yeah, I was one of the people that helped kill the award.
I was gonna say, it's like,
you're like, we gotta sunset this. That's enough of this.
Yeah, we did. I guess it was. Yeah, we changed the content creator. Was it 2 years ago now? Yeah, so worked out well.
Jeff, I'm sure everyone listening and or watching knows who you are, but I always ask somebody in case they don't. They wandered in here out of a cornfield. How do you describe yourself?
Oh, we'll let Twitter describe myself for me. It's just dangerous. I don't know. I mean, now my career has evolved over the years. I guess now I'm sort of a producer in a way. I guess is probably the best way to put it. In the, I used to be kind of I say I was sort of a journalist, and I became a host. Now I became a producer. And that's, I say that just because I now have a couple big events a year where I sort of do everything around them, right? So I produce the show, I host the show, I put it together, work with the game companies. So yeah, my career has evolved, but I would say probably producer is the best way to describe me right now.
How off the plan is that? Was that always the plan? How does this go for you? Because I think you're Geoff Keighley. You're the czar of video games, right? Like you're there. You're making announcements after the PlayStation event, which we'll get to on another level altogether on that one. But like when you started on this track, it seemed like you wanted to do the traditional route. And like, did you plan on taking it in your own direction, or was it just how the cards fell?
Yeah, I never really had a plan, to be honest with you. I think I always wanted to figure out how to kind of celebrate and elevate games. And, at a very early age, when I was a teenager, I knew that there's something special about the gaming industry. And the first award show about games in 1994 called Cybermania 94, I was actually helped write that show. And I was, I think, 13 years old or something like that at the time.
Good Lord, dude.
And so, when I was young, I kind of was a part of that, and I saw the opportunity to kind of celebrate games in a big way. And I was never one of those journalists who, like a lot of folks, our peers were kind of like using journalism as a way to almost like get a job at a game company, right? And that was a thing of like, hey, my dream is to go make a video game. And I never have wanted to go develop or design a video game. That was never my path, right? I loved covering games. I loved meeting all these like legendary game designers when I was younger. And I was like, these guys are super cool, but no one knows their story. So let me figure out how I can help tell their stories. So when I was doing journalism in high school and college, I was writing like behind the games and the final hours. And that was like stories about these developers. And then it just transitioned into like video stuff right after college with Victor Lucas and G4.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, natural. Was right at the time when YouTube was starting up and video was becoming a thing. I moved into that, and then I went off and did the television stuff for a good decade. And then the Game Awards was just sort of something that I was in a way kind of forced into, because the Spike Video Game Awards were not going to continue forward the way I wanted them to. So I'm like, I need to go off and build my own thing. It wasn't a master plan, but it's just kind of naturally evolved into what it is today. And now with, Gamescom and E3 and all these other events, that just has all kind of built on top of each other. So yeah, I'm lucky now that I get to be pretty selective in the things that I do say yes to, but I also feel like a heavy weight on my shoulders to be able to like deliver these events for fans when I don't make the game. So people always want crazy big announcements and things. And
it's never good enough. It's never good enough.
Yeah. So that's always like a bit of a challenge to, like maintain the high standards of the things that we do. But yeah, it's it was never a plan, but I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out so far.
You talk about the heavyweight. I think the thing of knowing you, right, and getting to talk to you and hang out with you like Judges Week or see you at the occasional event is that you're always working and you're always planning. And it legitimately is with you that the night that you give yourself that one night after the game or the party after the Game Awards to celebrate what you just did. Yeah. But I know for a fact you wake up the next day and start working on the next iteration, what the next year will look like for the Game Awards.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think sometimes people, you meet general people in the industry and someone's like, well, it's like October, you gotta be starting to think about the Game Awards now. And it's like, no, we're, it is kind of a year-long thing where, we're thinking a lot about the show, especially this year. And, it's like everything that's been going on obviously causes even more consternation. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But yeah, in a general year, like it used to be, I would sort of spend the first half of the year really working on E3. And then I'd take a few weeks off after E3, and then I'd jump right into the Game Awards in July and start meeting with publishers and developers. Again, it all kind of has blended together in a way now in the, I'm talking to all the same people about Summer Game Fest and Gamescom and Game Awards. But yeah, it's really like, it's a year-round thing. And, I don't think people realize how involved I am often in the trailers that are in the show and the staging of them and the order of things. Like all of that is like very curated by me of, like thinking about how many seconds of black is in this trailer and, what's the first shot and what's the reaction going to be to all that. So it's fun and it's super collaborative, but yeah, it definitely is. It's like, it's a huge obligation, but also opportunity. And I'm so honored that people trust me to go off and, make the Game Awards every year. So I don't take that lightly. And even though the show has been growing and, successful, we work just as hard as we used to on it. And I'm always, like people are always saying, well, why doesn't this game show up at Game Awards? Like every game that you have dreamed of, I'm sure I've asked the question, can we get it for the Game Awards? And I usually get denied, but all that stuff that people want, believe me, I'm working very hard to unlock that stuff. But sometimes, the game is late or it's, it's not in development or it was canceled or, a bunch of other things happen. So, I stress about it.
Oh yeah.
Because I want the show to be as good as the previous year. And, we keep building. And like last year we announced, the new Xbox, right? And it's like, well, how do you top yourself? And, that's again, it's a pressure I'm used to though, because even with VGAs, like we were working on announcements and all that stuff. And it's a roller coaster because there are days where you get super excited. You think something's going to happen. And then someone calls you a week later saying like, wow, actually we're not going to be ready with this. And it's heartbreaking. So yeah, you just know that you have to work as hard as you can and hopefully it all works out.
Does the fact that you're doing it around tent poles, right? So there's Game Awards, there's, now Summer Game Fest, there's Opening Night Live. But speaking, I guess, just for Game Awards, does that make the positive and negative criticism hit harder? Because I always think about it, explaining to people here as we make kind of funny stuff and how in the early days and I was getting going or making these shows, you'd have a bad show, there'd be a technical difficulty. It would weigh me down so much. Whereas now 5 years later, I'm making 19 shows a day. And if, 3 of them have problems, who cares? You know what I mean? The track record's proven, but I know for you and I know for myself of creating stuff and then wanting honest feedback about it. I see it all the time when you do the Game Awards finish and you're right there and you go, all right, what did everybody think? What were the good? What was the bad? What can we change?
It's a unique phenomenon to spend, all year working on something that, your year is defined by these 2 hours, right?
Yeah,
and you said you don't get a redo the next week. You sort of like have to wait a whole year. So yeah, there's a pressure around that of, as you said, being judged based on that. And, so much of, the effort is, but it's not unlike sometimes a game developer, right? Where they work for 3 years on a game, in a vacuum and then ship it. And again, like for me, Game Awards, I get a shot every year. There's some developers that are like, I make a game every 6 years, right? So like I appreciate that even more about sort of the, the struggle to kind of build something and then, put it out there and be instantly judged. And look, it's with Game Awards, it's live. So like it's happening in real time. Like I'm watching on Twitter, what do people like and don't like? And yeah, I mean, what I will say is, having done like the Spike Video Game Awards for so many years, like I'm definitely used to, feedback, right. And commentary on it. And I think, we get better reactions now than we ever did before. to stuff. So yeah, like you develop a bit of a thick skin for it. And I read all the comments and, agree with a bunch of them. And people always don't have the context, I think, of, what goes on behind the scenes to understand why certain things are the way they are. But yeah, I like, I'm on the forums, I'm talking to the fans, I'm reading everything, after the show. Normally I go on vacation to Hawaii and, I'll read the Reset Era, 400-page thread and every page and see what people are thinking and, read all that. So yeah, I take it all in, and listen to the reaction, but you're right. It is a unique phenomenon that you can't do that over again for the next year. So yeah, you really you struggle with sort of how to make it work.
You see, it's interesting you call it a unique phenomenon, because I feel like you're such a unique personality, where this question is leading to this. Why haven't you done a podcast of your own? Isn't there a weekly Geoff Keighley, here's what's going on, and I'm doing this vlog? I feel like it's so interesting, because I always talk about when I describe my career, right, of entering IGN just as the founders of IGN were starting to burn out. And so I was this weird bridge of the people who founded the site, and then the site becoming, and this sounds horrible, I don't mean in the bad way, but a corporate entity, like, a real office, a real place. And obviously your career is similar in the way you've been around for so long and you've done so much different stuff. But, right now people are overexposed on Greg Miller. There's too much Greg Miller to go around and understand. Hours of any thought I ever give you is backed up by hours of me saying something similar. For you, right? Like, you exist in this thing where you are this definitive voice in games, right? That when you speak, it is so loud, but you, again, use it so rarely.
Yeah, it's something I think about a lot. And I would say a couple things about it. Like I used to do the kind of like the daily thing. Like when I was in college, I had my Game Slice website and I wrote like a daily blog about games all through college. And I think that constant grind of putting out content is, it's challenging. And look, a lot of my friends that are, in the YouTube world and content creators like you, it's like, I've seen sort of like what that can do to someone to be on that kind of constant wheel. And I did a little bit of that this summer, right? With Summer Game Fest, I was doing kind of more frequently doing stuff. And it was, it's challenging to be able to do that and then also have something like the Game Awards. And I think, people don't realize like most of my day, all day, is spent working on the Game Awards. So I don't have time to stream or to, do other things because I'm constantly on calls about TGA for, most of the year. And again, like that's, sort of by design, that I am so involved in that show in every aspect of it. I don't show up to host it. It's like I really, every second I'm kind of programming. So to answer your question, I would love to do a podcast. It's just to find the time to do that is challenging. And, these bigger tentpole shows take so much of me to be able to do them that, I just haven't been able to do a weekly video series or things like that. And I've tried that stuff. Like I did a blog in college every day. I used to do a weekly show on G4. I've done all that stuff. So in some ways I like that I can disappear for a while and then come back with these big moments, like the Game Awards, because he said it's unique. And I think at some point I probably will do a podcast. I've had a couple concepts for things. It's just figuring out like, what would those look like? How can I put those together? And also, because I'm so involved in something like Game Awards and I kind of, know things about games and projects, like it's always a little hard for me now, the position I'm in, to be able to like sort of go on have a weekly talk show reacting to games and talking about things. And everything I say, people are hypersensitive to. And even when I was on McCaffrey's podcast this summer and it was sort of like talking about, Xboxes, everyone's like, daggers out, like, what's he about to say? So I am like conscious of like being careful about sort of how often I talk about things, because look, there's a bunch of stuff we're doing for Game Awards that I just can't really talk about because I don't want to spoil it. And I also want to put myself in an awkward position of, pretending I don't know things either.
Sure. Yeah. As someone who does that, it sucks all the time. When you have to be like you dodge a question, you move around, and then somebody starts trying to go through and dissect what you said.
Yep.
And I have to imagine too, the other way that would cut, right, is again, like, granted, you're Geoff Keighley, you've been around forever, the Game Awards are fantastic. It would still be awkward, right, if you're going to developer X or publisher Y, and like, no, share your secrets with me. And they're like, you have a show. Like, what about when you do slip up and say something?
Yeah, no, and that's like, as you said, I kind of have to disappear for a while around this stuff. And again, people trust me, and I think they know that I'm not going to spoil my own surprises for the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, just even introducing the possibility of that is, concern for people. So yeah, I tend to, like, it's part of the thing with Summer Game Fest. Like, I did that, and some people were like, why don't you just keep going with this? And it's a little bit of that about not being in these sort of awkward situations where you can't talk about things, but it really more is just, it's honestly just a question of time. And the, Game Awards becomes like a, 7-day-a-week project, for most of the fall for all of us, right? Not just me. It's like I have an amazing team that works on the show, but something of that scale, it just really takes like an incredible amount of effort, which is, you're involved in like the judging and then figuring out what we're doing with the orchestra and the world premieres and the sponsors and just all that stuff coming together, is like an enormous time sink. And there are other projects I would love to do, and I just really can't do anything else because I'm so focused on TGA.
Do you ever see that changing? You talk about the team, you're always good in the run up to it, sharing like the table reads and all the stuff's going on and explaining that obviously it's more than just you, but in that same breath, the Game Awards are you, right? You're talking about how involved you are at every aspect. Do you see one day letting go of some of that and like having more free time for other things?
Yeah, look, it would be great. And yeah, I've always said that like, I'm going to do Game Awards for the rest of my life. Right. And it's not the thing where I was like creating it to go and sell it to someone or passing it off. So yeah, I mean, I think we're getting better at having more people involved, helping on things, but yeah, in terms of like the announcements and all that, I'm so involved. And you're right. It is challenging when you look at your year and say, hey, like I know 70% of my time is just consumed with, this show and doing this. So at some point you look at it and say, yeah, I'd love to be able to go off and do other things. And as you said, not have the burden of doing it, but it's also, I mean, I'm so honored to be in this position and trusted by people, the community, but also the developers to make this show. Like it's kind of it's a sacrifice I'm sort of happy to make. To your point, I'm sure will come a day where, I'm not going to host it anymore and I'll go behind the scenes and, think about that. And yeah, I do think a lot about sort of the succession plan. And, even if something were to ever happen to me one day, it's like, well, who takes over the show and how does this kind of continue forward? So, I think about that a lot. I don't know we have a perfect solution in terms of how that's all going to roll, but yeah, my team and we talk about some of those scenarios of like, how do we continue the show if I was even, sick or something, right? It's like, well, what do we do? How does that fit together? And yeah, I think eventually there will probably come a day where I will, probably maybe not host it, but then have other people involved. And we've had, like Sydney's done the pre-show. We've had other people involved doing things. So yeah, I think, I always look at like Dick Clark, he always hosted a bunch of shows, and eventually with the Golden Globes, he produced it, and he was always in kind of the press room back in the day where he would kind of do interviews with talent. And I might be involved in some way, but less of a front man for the awards. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I host it, and I say that it's like I'm more of an MC. Like, I was never a big believer in we need, a snappy comedian kind of coming out and doing the monologue at the top of the show. It's like people just want to get to the games and see the stuff. And people like you and I, know this industry and love it. And that's the thing that people also ask like, well, it's cool you host it, but like, when are we getting, Kumail Nanjiani to host it or Chris Rock or something like that? And we'd love to have those guys involved in the show, but I just kind of like want to get right to the games and the content. And that's kind of been our approach. So yeah, eventually it definitely will evolve.
I feel like that's going to happen organically. Like you're saying, you're already involving other people. And I do think one of the things that set the Game Awards apart is that it is definitively you are the face of it. And it is that thing of, yeah, we all remember when we had these award shows and they be hosted by somebody from Hollywood who would mispronounce a developer's name and or have no idea what reference they're reading off the prompter. And that always sucked. You know what I mean? Like that's what is awesome about you being the person of the Game Awards. That is that it's unabashedly you and you unabashedly love games. And I think that's what,
I do think there is an authenticity to it. He said it's just me and people know that like I'm, I actually know, I know these developers and I've selected these games that we're introducing. So yeah, it is, as you said, kind of authored by me in a way. Which, there's good and bad aspects of that, but I try and be as fair as I can and work with everyone around it. But yeah, I agree with you that I think it's going to evolve over time, but we're not in any rush to, change it. And that was the thing. I think when I was doing some of the TV stuff, there was always this sense of like, we have to get this huge celebrity to host it. And it's just not needed. And I think the thing that we've proven with Game Awards is it's growing organically through the gaming community. And we don't need the cosign of the cast of this television show in order to get us viewership. And I think we've done talent stuff in the show, and it's super fun to do that. But now the tables have turned, and like even this year, it's like we have the movie studios and streaming companies coming to us, pitching us stuff, and we've seen that with Netflix and HBO. I mean, they're all doing all these video game adaptations, right? And it's sort of interesting that like the world has changed around a lot in the 7 years we've done Game Awards, where gaming actually is the center of entertainment now.
That's what we always knew would eventually happen and hoped, obviously. But it was that idea of every time a movie studio did a terrible adaptation of a video game, be like, why? Like, what are you doing? Or anytime an award show would try to pull in somebody who didn't have any business being there, why? Just make this for us. And I think that's why Game Awards has found success and why it's been welcomed in the way it's been welcomed in. I remember being at that first Game Awards, right? When your first one, and I'd done the Spike ones, obviously, but when it was yours, and it was that idea of being there and being like, oh my God, like this is amazing. Like the musical performances, right? And the Imagine Dragons and the piano. And like, it was just like, this is what this is about. And I think every year, because you're so involved and because you are honestly trying to make it the best show it can be, you see you and the show iterate on that and keep going. And that's why it keeps growing, is because, and as it goes, I would assume you'd have to tell me, now the more established it gets, the easier it is to do something like reveal an Xbox at it. Whereas I don't think probably year one that would have been as easy.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, I still look back at the first year and I'm like amazed that, we had like the first gameplay of Breath of the Wild and like Imagine Dragons and Koji Kondo. And I mean, all this stuff that like, I still think it's one of my favorite shows because it's just like, it just all came together. And I mean, that was like a crazy year. We built that show in like, I don't want to say 6 or 8 weeks, right? It was just insane that like the stars aligned for that. So I'm so grateful that actually worked out. But yeah, it definitely, we've been able to iterate on it. You said the numbers continue growing. We've had some really big reveals in the show. So yeah, we're blessed that like a lot of stuff gets pitched. It gets harder because we have to say no to more things now in the shows. We just don't have the room, right? And it's a good problem to have, but it's also challenging because there are lots of developers that, dream of being on the show and set that as a goal. And then you have to kind of break their heart and say like, hey, this isn't going to work or this isn't going to fit. So, it's again, a little challenging, and I feel bad that I have to sort of be the decision maker on some of that stuff for some of these developers and games. But yes, it's definitely gotten easier for the bigger publishers and everyone to see this as, it's one of the biggest live events on the internet period every year. So yeah, people want to be a part of it and hopefully show good stuff.
Well, I think they want to be a part of it and show good stuff like you're talking about. But I think you also, and I don't know if you're able to see this as you plan the next one as soon as it ends, like I do think that it's a rising tide lifts all boats situation. I do think that you inspire greatness in other people, because it is that idea that Game Awards is this centerpiece, right? And I think, my Game Awards speech is what got me the ability to go host the DICE Awards, where they were legitimately like, hey, we want to move away from having a celebrity. We like the speech. We'd like it to be like that. Can you come do that? It's like, oh, sure. And then as you look around, like even for us doing the game showcase, when there was no PSX anymore, it was that idea of, we loved that idea that the Game Award kicks it off. And obviously there's only so much time you can do, and you can't show every indie game that wants to be a part of. So how can we help do that? And I've seen that, especially this year with the amount of showcases and collections and collectives there have been, right? You see people being like, well, no, there's a blueprint that I think you're a big part of, that people understand how they can go do things.
Yeah, no, this digital event stuff has, as you said, we kind of pioneered it back in 2014. And it was, I mean, when I first pitched the show to people, no one could understand how this is going to work when it's not on television and what's it going to look like. And, now obviously you said everything's streamed and everything's done in its own way. And yeah, the model for Game Awards, it's like been refined over the years, right? And, it's like the people always debate, how many awards are you doing versus how many announcements, and, what's the balance and all that. And, having done these similar kinds of shows for, more than a decade now, I've just kind of found a rhythm. But you're right, I've been able to author it more on my own. And I think when I was at Spike and even G4 before that, you're kind of part of a committee making suggestions and learning a lot about how to build these things. But finally, yeah, over, the past 5 or 6 years, I've been able to kind of, fully own the show. And if, people don't like the games we're picking to announce, it's like, they can blame me, and blame the developers a little bit too, because I don't make the games. But yeah, it's, I think you're right that I found that the authenticity of the experience is really important to this community, and we don't need other people to parachute in and sort of be a part of this. It's like our community is, tens or hundreds of millions of people big. And that was always my point when you see the television shows. It's like we were kind of trying to cast this super wide net of people that were fans of celebrities and whatnot, because, we need the Jersey Shore cast in the show because it's a big show and their fans are going to watch this. And I'm like, no, like we need to hit the bullseye of just gamers first and foremost, which is a massive army of people. And once we get all those people in, then maybe we can start to kind of, grow the bullseye. But there's a lot of people, in the bullseye that we need to hit first.
100%. So we've talked about the start of this. We've talked about the weight of it on your shoulders. Yeah. How has that weight been in 2020? Because I feel like, has your plan for the Game Awards changed week to week? I mean, now obviously we're announced, the multi-city thing that's going on the stream, yeah. But like as COVID ramps up and all this starts popping off and we don't know where we're going, what we're doing, how do you try to plan an award show around that?
Yeah, look, I mean, we started to see the COVID stuff very early in the year, February, March, right? And we were kind of unsure what will we do. And I think initially, like all of us, I think I was hopeful that like, oh, this, thank God we're not till December, and like hopefully it's all going to get sorted out, and by December we'll be good. And then I think as we got into summer, it became more clear, like, no, this is sort of here to stay. And, we're probably going to have to pivot our plans a little bit. So I would say by May or June, we began to realize that we're probably going to have to change what we do. And the first question I had to everyone on my advisory board was like, well, do we still do the show? Do we delay it? What's the right approach? And the universal response from every publisher and every platform was that no, like you definitely should still do it in December. This is actually an opportunity because gaming has comforted and brought people together in a big way in 2020, when a lot of these other entertainment mediums haven't been able to do live music concerts or haven't been able to put out movies. So for, my show, which I've always aspired to be the biggest award show in entertainment that just happens to be about games, this is kind of our opportunity or our year to really show the world the power of this medium. So we knew in the summer we were going to do it. And then it was just a question of like, how do we produce it? I think we knew we probably weren't gonna be able to have a live audience and the, 5,000-6,000 people that usually come to the show. Like that wasn't going to happen just because most of these game companies are work from home through next year, some of them even through next summer. So it's like, we knew, well, developers aren't going to fly to LA. And then we just started thinking about like, well, what does the show look like? The multi-city thing was something I've always wanted to do with Game Awards. Like I've always kind of secretly dreamed of like, let's do the Game Awards live from Tokyo and get, the entire industry to like fly to Tokyo, which I think, we have the power to get everyone over there. Obviously not this year, but I'm like, maybe we can play with that idea this year and do something in Tokyo, do something in London, do something in LA, and kind of connect those three continents together. And, we're still doing a lot similar to the Emmys with like nominees will appear kind of virtually and stuff like that as part of it. So we're still honestly figuring it out. And that's the week to week stuff of how do we do music performances? How do we do our orchestra? How do we involve talent? That's all the stuff that honestly we are midstream on and still figuring out. But yeah, we decided in the summer, we're going to stick to our same timing, second Thursday of December. We knew we wanted to leave Microsoft Theater and do something different, but all that is still evolving about like what our set's going to look like and how we're going to involve people.
I think what's so fascinating, and again, it's something I only think about because of where I am in the industry and what I do working with you on Game Awards. And again, I'm talking about working with you as I send my ballot to you, right? Yeah. Like I'm not like cracking the atom or anything, but it is that idea. Everything you just talked about is such a production issue. How are you then also grappling with it's a launch year for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, all these different games. And, the November 12th release date for PlayStation 5 and 10th for Series X, right, is beyond what I'm right. That's beyond what last year's was. Cause I remember last year's because of Fallen Order and that whole thing of when are we going to talk about
Fallen Order was, later. I think our cutoff is, I'm not 100% sure, but I think our cutoff last year was like November 15th, and I think Fallen Order was like the 18th or something.
If memory serves, I think it was. Remember, they were trying to get us code for that final day that would have left it eligible.
Yeah,
and they couldn't make it.
It's a rush, and I think when I look back, actually, like last year the date was earlier, and previous years it had always been in the November 20th or whatever. And yeah, it's like, look, it's a complicated process. He said with games, especially with new consoles coming out, we've got, there's Cyberpunk, which is right on the edge there, and there's Hyrule Warriors, and there's so there's a lot happening in November. And yeah, my whole thing is like, and you're one of the judges. The whole thing is like just making sure that people can play these games and like credibly vote on what they think are the best nominees, and then the winner selection is a couple weeks later when people have had more chance to play stuff. But yeah, it's definitely even for you and a lot of the outlets that vote on this stuff, it's tough because you get like 6 games all in the last day, and it's like, well, how am I going to play Assassins and Demon Souls and Miles, Cyberpunk, in a weekend? And that's the thing is with movies or the Oscars, like you can get through 10 movies in a marathon day, but like games, it's like, hey, well, Cyberpunk, I don't know, it's probably 40, 50 hours at least, right, to finish it. So it's like, how do you find the time to do that and evaluate it? So yeah, and COVID obviously is adds challenges because most of the big games no one's played at all this year, right? So it's like normally we would have probably played Miles or had played, I guess we've played Cyberpunk and Assassins, but there are a bunch of Demon Souls I don't think anyone's played yet. So that's the thing, is it's a little more challenging because there's none of these preview events, and publishers are trying to figure that out now with like you've done some of the streaming stuff where
Parsec, let's find out about the Parsec, right?
Exactly. Yeah, Parsec, and Ubisoft's use that, and we played Cyberpunk that way. So that's part of the thing we're figuring out is like, how do we how does everyone, all the media, get to play these games to legitimately judge them? And can we figure out, a lot of people have been asking about like, well, Cyberpunk, is it going to hit the date or not? And it's like, some people are like, oh, well, November 15th was your date last year, so Cyberpunk comes out the 19th, it must not be eligible. I'm like, that was last year's date. The previous year's dates have been in the 20s. So it all just comes down to like, as you said with Jedi Fallen Order is a great example, it's like, how can we find a legitimate cutoff point where we feel like people can properly evaluate the games? And Jedi Fallen Order is eligible this year, and I hope it gets nominated. And Smash, last year got nominated for Game of the Year because it came out the night of the Game Awards. So it's just funny, like people are, people care so much. And look, I love the idea of the most possible games competing this year, but it's also not a bad thing for something to be eligible the next year.
Well, I don't know if you ever heard of this guy. There's this guy I co-host Games Daily with named Gary Whitta. And he's always giving you in the Game Awards grief about it. I'm like, well, it's arbitrary that it's in December at all. And I'm like, Gary, it can be anywhere. It's as long as it's their show. Let them do it, and then it'll just, that's the rules.
In the Oscars this year, I think, are in April. Their eligibility is extended. I think the Grammys, their cutoff, I believe, is like October 1st, like right now, for like the Grammy Awards for next year. And yeah, I think this whole idea that everything has to be this perfect calendar year, we never represent our show being that way. And it tends to be that most of the big games come out by Thanksgiving US every year. So yeah, the game companies and everyone are aligned around this December timing. And I actually think it's interesting that like we're sort of this first show in December, and Smash Brothers got up for Game of the Year last year, so it's not like these games are forgotten. And that's why, like, I hope, Jedi Fallen Order, I don't know if it'd be nominated for Game of the Year this year, but it could be, and I think it could at least get some genre nominations. And yeah, that was a whole thing. I remember everyone was like up about that, and there was an issue last year where maybe Doom was going to be past our eligibility, but then they bumped it to March and delayed the release. So that's the other thing is, Cyberpunk was supposed to be out in September, and then it got delayed. And like, who knows, this year there could be other games that, don't make their dates. Or we just saw, I think Shadowlands they just announced that that's pushing back, and that was supposed to be end of October. So in this year, in these circumstances, things are going to shift around, and we have to pick our dates and pick our show date and just kind of roll ahead with it. And the minute we start like tweaking everything, because it's going to be 3 weeks later for this or that, it just creates so much drama. And look, our show, we have to pick our date very early in the year just to like figure out things, especially now that we have a bunch of games that launch the night of the show and everything firing off. I mean, people care, and I appreciate that. And the big thing for me is just, we have to make sure that like games can be properly evaluated in order to be nominated. And I don't want people just nominating things because they think it's going to be good.
Totally. I mean, that was last year my thing with Fallen Order, where it was I had such a great time at the preview event, but I wasn't confident in giving it a nomination because I had fun for 2 hours. Like, I need to know what that actually looks like in the end.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, you know, you really want, and if you, maybe there's a game that you played 3 hours of and you're like, this is so good, I know it's gonna be great, it's at least worthy of a nomination, and you can do it. But you said there are other judges that may say, hey, I want to play through the entire experience and I'm not comfortable voting until, you know, I played that. And that's, you're right. And the other thing that with our show is that games are eligible every year, and that's something we changed over the past couple of years. But it's like, you know, just because a game came out last year, like Hades is a great example, right? It's like getting all this acclaim now. And, you know, we announced that, it was 2 or 3 years ago at the show, came out in early access on Epic, then it came Steam. And now everyone's like, I saw Keza wrote a piece in the Guardian about like, this is game of the year this year. And like, that's a great example of a game that was eligible in past years. Maybe it'll get nominated this year. Like, I think, you know, Among Us is another great example of something that came out a couple of years ago. Nobody paid attention to, and people ask me like, is that eligible this year? Like, of course it's eligible. It's like, if people want to vote that as one of the best experiences this year, the fact that it came out in 2018 is fine by me. So this whole idea that I think is sometimes like, and Gary and I kind of fought a bit about this last year, where it's like this idea that like, oh, it's lost its opportunity. And Jay Fallen had lost opportunity. It's like, no, it has its opportunity this year. And I think our judges are really good at like understanding that. And yeah, it's like, I'm really not like very rule based about, you know, like, oh, its shot was last year, it can't be nominated this year. If people decide that Among Us is one of the best games of 2020, the fact it came out in 2018, totally fine by me.
Yeah, you know, hats off to you on that, because that's, I think, the right way and the 2020 modern way to do it. I think so many of us were locked into how EGM or Game Informer, or however it used to be done when all this started, right? And last year, I remember in particular, like you're talking about, I remember you being very public about it on Twitter of like, hey, like, that's not how this works. It can be what's the biggest game this year? It doesn't matter when it came out. And it was the same thing of on the ballot last year, you explaining that of like, hey, it doesn't need to be a game that actually like released this year, as well as you being like, hey, and remember, Smash Brothers is eligible. Like, you went out of your way to be like, hey,
because I think we have to like correct that, because they said people just don't necessarily think that way. And I've said on the record, like, I think there will be a year when our game of the year is a game that came out in a past year, or conceivably
Avengers with Spider-Man next year,
game of the year 2 years in a row.
Yeah, well, that's true too. That's true.
No, but that's what I mean. But it's like, you look at that and we have ongoing game, but it's like, I treat, you know, our show now sort of like the Emmys treat seasons of TV shows, right? And like, you know, Breaking Bad can win best show 2 years at the Emmys because it has 2 seasons, right? So why can't, you know, a game, you know, why can't Fortnite, you know, win game of the year 4 years after it came out, if that was the best year compared to every other game out there? And I just think people have to change their thinking about that. And then that's, you know, there'll be a year, I think, where there'll be a game that will come back, and Among Us might be that game where it's just like, wait, yeah, this is actually like, maybe this deserves to be nominated. And there's a season of a game, and, you know, like Rainbow Six is a great example of a game that's like growing over time. And like, maybe that deserves to be nominated when it wasn't nominated the year it came out. And that's like, I put the power in the hands of people like you and the media that vote on these, you know, categories to say, here's things to keep in mind, up to you guys to decide. And, you know, as people know, like, I hope they know that, like, I don't pick the nominees, and it's really like up to like our jury of, you know, media and publications globally to like make those choices.
That's the hardest eye roll I ever have, is when I see somebody coming at you on Twitter about the nominees. I'm like, what? No, he didn't. What? No, we did that.
Yeah, when it's like, no, we voted. Look, and that was the same thing with like the Death Stranding stuff and everything. And like, you know, it's like, oh, he's rigging it for Kojima or whatever. And it's, you know, I just don't, people don't read. And like, if you don't read the FAQ on the website and you don't understand the process, it's like, I can't help you. And yeah, like, I mean, we think about that, and I'm far too close to, you know, the nominees and also the game companies that are, you know, involved in the show on multiple levels, that, yeah, like I have to divorce myself from that. And as you said, I'm such the brand of the show. I get that, you know, and developers, same thing. They'll be like, oh, Keighley screwed me, I didn't get nominated. Right. And it's like, you know,
well, that's when I'm like, yeah, he did. You're right. Yeah. I just get out of the room.
One of the toughest days of the year for me is the day we announce the nominees, because there are lots of people that are happy. And then I get a lot of folks like, complaining to me about like, well, why weren't we nominated or what happened? And I'm like, talk to the people that voted. And I need to be sort of church and state with that stuff around, the nominees. Obviously I know who the nominees are before we announce them publicly, but because we tape the special and stuff like that. But yeah, I try and be like a little distant from that in terms of how we approach it. And yes, like I help establish the rules and the eligibility dates and how we think about that stuff. But it's like we're trying to learn. And we're in a lucky spot because people care so much about the awards. They take it very seriously. And I appreciate that. But yeah, I try and be very above board about like, here's our process. Here's why we decided these dates and these eligibility dates. And, we also use it as a forcing function with game companies. Say like, you need to get code out to these, judges and jury to be able to like evaluate your game in time to make a proper evaluation, because it's not fair that everyone gets every game on, November 8th and you have to play through, 8 40-hour games in like 3 days to decide. It's just, that's not fair either.
I'm going to be fascinated to see who the first publisher or developer is that comes up with the for-your consideration package. Because, like obviously for the Emmys and Oscars, they have the billboards down in LA that are the for-your consideration. And over the years, I've seen publishers get not more aggressive, but more like, hey, we know it's coming up. Here's all the games we put out this year. We want you to know. Like they are good about it.
We try, and we have kind of, you may not have seen it, but on the publisher side, like we do have kind of a no campaigning policy. We try and be mindful of like not getting folks inundated with stuff. And you're right, you'll get emails. It'll say, hey, here are the games that came out here.
Let us know if you need code. That's always, let us know if you need anything.
Right. Which is good. And I think that's fine. I think the thing that, and I remember this way back when we did the, the E3 awards in the 90s or 2000s, like, that was where like people would be like sending bottles of wine and just all, like all this crazy stuff and all this swag. And that's why I was like, we're going to stop all that. We're not going to allow any of that kind of shenanigans around, that was 15 years ago with all the awards, even E3
different
awards.
Industry.
It's just like, let's leave that behind. But yeah, I said people like, they really care. And yeah, there are developers that, also feel just they don't get a fair shake. And it's like, I always hear from the sports games guys where it's like, can NBA 2K ever be up for game of the year? And I'm like, that's a good question. It's a big game, but it's like, there's certain genres that just, you're one of the jury members. It's like, it's just very hard for those things to break through for those categories. And I don't know how we change that. It's just sort of same thing with, the Oscars. It's always a debate about, do popular movies get nominated for Best Picture or do the most critically acclaimed ones? And I do think like our show overall, we tend to nominate some pretty big games and some small games. And I love that, that mix and who knows what this year is going to be. I mean, it's such an eclectic year. I hope that there are a couple surprises about what gets nominated for Game of the Year. And, of course, we expect that, a Tlu or something is going to get nominated for Game of the Year, but like, what's the Celeste this year? What's the kind of unexpected game that gets up there, which makes it more interesting?
It's got to be Fall Guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting, right? It's like, can Fall Guys get in there? Can I mean, Animal Crossing, I think, has a great shot. There's big Sony games, obviously with Ghost and Tlu, and who knows, maybe Miles or Demon Souls.
Knock on wood, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of unknowns, right? Of like all these titles that are coming out. Cyberpunk, like will that hit? Sort of, there's a lot. It's going to be a really interesting year, and there's a lot of unknowns, right? And here we are in early October. We're taping this October 1st, and it's like, in the next 6 weeks, a lot's going to happen.
I mean, today was that, not even today, I guess, really a couple of weeks ago was the first damn breaking moment. But, today I have like Crash reviews drop, Star Wars review drop. Like, That's how it's going to be. And that's why this is the best time every year for gamers, right? Of this rush up to Black Friday of what's going to happen and what's going to be huge.
Yep. No, and that's why it's, extremely busy for us. Cause, it's not just who are the nominees. It's like that cues our show, right? And especially this year, it's like, well, what's our orchestra going to perform? It's like, we're doing more virtual stuff with developers. So like, well, if you can't fly in, it's like, we're like, we need to test your web connection. It's just like, there's so many things that have to happen once we know the nominees. So yeah, it's a tight timeline for us to pull all this together and get it ready for December. But I think, overall, what I will say is our show, I think, has done a pretty good job, like with the winners. You look at like compared to other award shows and, DICE or GDC, it's like, it tends to be like the same games get nominated for our shows, other shows. It's not like, because we're earlier, it's like there was,
yeah.
that's different. And even like Jedi Fallen Order, it's like all the other award shows. It wasn't like it got tons of nominations elsewhere and didn't at our show. And, maybe Smash did. And Last Guardian, I think, was another one that was like a December game the year before. And that got nominated at our show. So as long as people get their due, they just might have to be patient. And it might be the next year. And I'm fine with that.
We talk about what a weird year it is, games slipping and all these delays. Does that make it even harder for you to nail down the world premiere trailers, the exclusive announcements, stuff like that, because those timetables suddenly shift? They're not able to deliver what they want or think they can?
Yeah. I think there's a little of that, but I think we also benefited from some things that were, maybe going to be at E3 or Gamescom and got delayed, but like Game Awards becomes this next, forcing function of like, well, maybe we can end the year and like show something at the awards. So yeah, it's always so hard to know. I think we've benefited in some aspects. I'm sure there are other things that, yes, games are running late and they maybe wanted to announce it at Game Awards and they weren't ready, but also, the cycle on kind of the timeline between like announcing a game and shipping a game, I think is coming down. Like we saw this summer, people, really push back when Rocksteady announced Suicide Squad and it was like, CG trailer. It's like coming in 2022. And, some people were like, why, just wait until you're ready to show us the game. It's already been, 6 or 7 years. So I think, people want, less CG stuff. They want to see games. And again, that's part of what I do in curating is like, yeah, we'll have some CG stuff and yeah, we'll have some gameplay stuff and we'll have some games that get announced and launched that night. And I think it's just, finding the right mix of stuff. So yeah, it's been an interesting year. I will say that I feel pretty good about where we're at. All things considered, my biggest fear in the summer was like, oh, we're going to move ahead with the show, but you said we won't have those announcements. And this is the year. It's like, oh, they didn't have anything to announce. And I think, based on where we're at today, I think we've got some really good stuff that is in development. But what people don't understand probably about the show is that there are things often that will get pulled from the show, sometimes days or, like a week before the show, where it's just like a developer's like, hey, we were trying to get this ready, but we're not ready. And, I'm never going to force anyone to show a game that they're not comfortable with. So that's the other thing is like, there's stuff that, at some point I'll tell stories about some of the games that we were going to show things on. And, literally like the day before the show, it's like, yep, this is out. We're not doing it. And so things definitely change. So I feel like pretty good today, early October, but there's a lot of unknowns that are going to happen.
Checking in December. See how you're feeling. Checking in December. Yeah. Early October feel really good.
I mean, this is like the producing this show it's an exercise in rejection because there's lots of things I ask for. And it's like, it's heartbreaking when it's like, I know everyone wants this game and like, really, you guys can't pull something together for us. Like really? And it's like, it's an exercise in rejection and frustration, and there'll be great days and bad days. And they'll be like, yesterday there was a huge thing that we were going to do at the show. And the developer called me and said like, yeah, no, sorry. It's like, we're running behind on this and we're not going to be ready. And it's like, that's heartbreaking. But then, tomorrow there'll be something brand new that pops in and you get an email and be like, whoa, cool. So yeah, you just have to be like very level headed. And like, I know probably half the show will change between now and December, and you just have to roll with it. And not be precious about it because things are going to change.
Well, Geoff, it's that time of the show where I want to kick it over to the friend zone. This is where the Kind of Funny best friends write in with their questions for you. But before then, I want to remind you that We Have Cool Friends. Remember, this is Kind of Funny's interview show that posts each and every Tuesday, youtube.com/Kind of Funny. Podcast services around the internet. Please give it a like, subscribe, share wherever you get it. Shout out to our Patreon producer, Mohammed. Remember, you can go to patreon.com/Kind of Funny where you can get your questions read. You can get your name read. You can get the show ad-free. And speaking of ads, here's a word from our sponsor. This episode of We Have Cool Friends is brought to you by MeUndies. MeUndies believes that your comfort is about more than what's touching your skin. It's about feeling comfortable in your skin. Keyword your, not someone else's. This isn't a Mike Myers movie, but it is almost Halloween, which means you can match your undies to the spookiest season of all time. That caught me off guard. I love MeUndies. You know that. You've heard the whole story. I bought my first pack of MeUndies, threw away the rest of my underwear, ordered more MeUndies. Didn't expect the Mike Myers reference on them. So, all right, Mike, whatever. MeUndies just launched 3 new Halloween prints. So whether you're into cats, blood, or skeletons, they've got something right up your haunted alley. Like I said, I wear them all the time. How do I know? Because today, as we record this, it's October 1st, which means, look, Kev, candy corn. All right, that's what I had to do.
Candy corn's the worst.
Okay, candy corn's really good, but regardless of how you feel about actual candy corn, the underwear are great because they're soft. They're made of micro-modal fabric. They, of course, they break down these trees to make the underwear. It's all sustainable. It's great. Everybody loves them. Remember, they also have MeUndies memberships. Never run out of undies with the MeUndies membership, a subscription box that sends new pairs right to your door because who really wants to grab that questionable 6-pack of underwear at your local drugstore? Nobody. Plus, get site-wide savings and exclusive offers. MeUndies has a great deal for my listeners. For any first-time purchasers, you get 15% off and free shipping. MeUndies also has their problem-free philosophy. If you're not, that's got to be trademarked. If you're not satisfied with any product for any reason, they'll refund or exchange it. No caveats, no questions. To get your 15% off your first order and free shipping, go to MeUndies.com/morning. That's MeUndies.com/morning. Our next sponsor, why, it's HelloFresh. Get fresh, pre-measured ingredients and mouth-watering seasonal recipes delivered right to your door with HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. HelloFresh lets you skip those trips to the grocery store and makes home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. Of course, let's talk about it. You will know it. I know it. The American people know it. Tim and Gia have been using this. Gia has made these amazing burgers that Tim sends me photos of, but has not given me the recipe for because I need to subscribe to HelloFresh. I understand it. But of course, you're saving your time, you're saving your money, and you're, of course, not stressing out with HelloFresh. You pick the meals you want. They send them into a box. They put them in a box. They send you the box. You open the box, and then there's a step-by-step instructions, the ingredients. It's all there. It's all perfect. It's all easy to make. It's all delicious. And again, like I said, you select the stuff you want. It's great. You get the variety delivered. You get sustainability delivered. HelloFresh delivers pre-portioned ingredients so you're not overbuying, which of course is a burden on the planet and your wallet. The packaging HelloFresh uses to ship your food is almost entirely made from recyclable and or already recycled content. You can keep your fridge stocked by adding extra proteins or sides like garlic bread to your weekly order. HelloFresh is, of course, committed to making fresh, delicious food available now more than ever and has taken extra steps to keep its employees and customers safe, including contactless delivery, tamper-proof packaging, and team member wellness checks. Ladies and gentlemen, we love HelloFresh. We know you will too. Go to HelloFresh.com/80morning. That's 80morning. And use the code 80morning to get a total of $80 off across 5 boxes, including free shipping on your first box. Again, HelloFresh.com/80morning and use the code 80morning to get a total of $80 off across 5 boxes, including free shipping on your first box. Okay, Geoff. Now you're in the friend zone, where the kind of funny best friends write in and ask you questions. Are you prepared?
Whether I am or not, we're doing it. So.
It's happening. The train's left the station. Civil Warlord on Twitter has the question everybody's asking. What was up with learning from his tweet that Demon's Souls was a launch title and not at the PlayStation event? And where did this avalanche of information that led to pre-orders come from? What? You're Geoff Keighley. I understand it. You know everything. All right. You know things that are going to happen 30 years from now in the games industry. Yeah. What the hell happened on this day, Geoff?
Yeah, that was it was an interesting thing because I host these things. I'm doing a stream and I was just literally just on Twitter. So yeah, some of that information came from I think it was the Japanese blog posted a bunch of stuff early because you see one of my tweets. It was Sackboy has a different name in Japan. I think it's called Rip Boy or something So I posted the launch lineup and it was I listed Demon Souls and Miles and Destruction Derby, whatever. And then it was instead of Sackboy, I said Rip Boy's Adventure or something like that. And that was because that was on the Japanese blog. That's what he's called. So that's where the tweet was from. Then I had to correct it afterwards. So yeah, it was some of that was that. And then the pre-order stuff, I was talking to people at PlayStation in real time after. I just said hey, what's the pre-order info? And I didn't see anything. It's it's, coming out. Retailers will probably start tomorrow. And it was happening in real time. So it was, I don't know the whole sort of cadence of, when Sony was communicating stuff and how it rolled out. But yeah, I was just, kind of providing information in real time. And some of the stuff with the tweet I put out about like Miles also coming to PS4, like Insomniac had tweeted that, and I just posted that. So I was just kind of like in real time on Twitter, just like pulling together all the facts. And I just, I became kind of this like conduit, which, you know, people are always watching my Twitter anyways for stuff. So I think just because I was posting stuff and amplifying other things that were out there, it seemed like I was becoming kind of this like official news source. And, you know, the PlayStation Twitter, I don't think was posting a lot of it. So people were just like, yeah. And it's also part of it was say is like, these events are so hard right now for these companies to put together. And, you know, you were involved with the EA one this summer, and it's just like, it's really challenging. So I think that's the thing is these big, you know, moments that PlayStation event in many ways was, you know, they didn't really need to do it, right? They had a big event in June and they could have just put out the, you know, price and release date as a blog post, but they wanted to do, I think, this bigger thing. So I really appreciate like all the companies that are doing this and how challenging it is. So yeah, I'm sure people, you know, wanted more announcements in certain events or wanted things to roll out differently. And it's so hard to do this stuff. So I totally agree with people's, you know, perception of some of, you know, like, hey, these things could have been done better in this way or that way. But at the end of the day, like information got out. Obviously the pre-order stuff on PS5 was challenging, right? The way the retailers kind of jumped the gun on that. And, you know, we saw that with Xbox too. It's like, it's just really hard to like, you know, there's so much demand for this stuff. No matter, you know, everyone, I think with PS5 just wanted a, you know, a fair shot at rejection really, right? And that was the thing.
Just not to have them plucked from their shopping carts or get
right. That's what I mean. It's just like one of those ones that like was never going to be perfect anyways and was going to be challenging. So yeah, I think, you know, we all got through it. And look, I was the same guy looking for pre-orders and stuff. And people are like, oh, you have a Series X. What's like, you know, you just got one. Like we have to send those back. So it's like, I need to get another one. And hopefully Xbox is going to send me one, but
yeah, you know, you can't ever take it for granted, right? That
who knows in this world. And so like, yeah, I'm going to spend the $500 to like reserve a Series X. And, you know, people were like, couldn't believe on Twitter, like, why is he pretending he needs a pre-order? It's like, because none of us are guaranteed anything. It's like,
the exact same. Yeah. Whenever I talk about it too, of pre-ordering, like I think we have a bunch of PlayStation 5s pre-order right now. And when I mention that and talk about it, even Gary's like, oh, like the Sony's not going to take care of you. I'm like, I don't know. Are they? I'm not going to trust anybody in 2020 to do anything, and not because they're jerks, because who the hell knows what's going on.
They have limited quantities, and like, you know, who knows when you're going to get it. And like, I'm sure, you know, I'm going to need you know, this is our life. We're probably going to need multiple systems at some point, you know, either to gift to someone or use in some way, or I'm going to need to take a PS5 to the writers of the Game Awards because they need to play Miles or something. Oh man, they could play it on PS4, but yeah, it's
nobody wants to do that.
I'm sure it'll be fun. I mean,
I'm kidding. No, plenty of people do. It's just a joke.
And I'm going to say, I'm sure it's probably going to be tons of fun on PS4. And I mean, yeah, it's interesting. Like all the drama around like what's coming out when and what platform. And yeah, it's just, and you feel this even on Twitter, like people are just there's so much tension right now around like, you know, like, are you a PlayStation fan or an Xbox fan? And the thing we did a couple of years ago at Game Awards with having like Sean, Phil, and Reggie come out, like that was about like, hey, we're all one community. And I'm just, you know, it's like, you get this too, I'm sure, but it's like, there's just so much like drama right now on Twitter around, like, if I post one thing about one platform or another platform, it's like, there's just like, you know, like all these replies about like, I posted the Cyberpunk ad with Keanu Reeves and people are like, you didn't include the Series X image at the end of the ad. And it's like, but there are two Xbox logos at the beginning and end of the ad. Like, and it's like, I can't even keep up with it.
No, yeah, people are fired up. And I think the fact that, you know, obviously what a huge year for gaming in terms of sales, right? We talk about this in the numbers and how crazy it's been. And I think so much of that is because we're all at home, right? And you're seeing less people and you're doing fewer things and you're spending your money on something that goes longer, which is great for getting people excited about games. But then I also think people are at the same time starving for new information. And that's the thing where anytime anything drops right now, it's dissected and torn apart and there's think pieces in this and like, you know, yesterday's doing a recasting of Peter Parker and Spider-Man, right? And like it was off to the races. And then it's like, what game can bring its PlayStation 4 save to PlayStation 5? And it's all these things that like,
I look, it's a great point because I do think there's so much drama around stuff. And look, I mean, that was, you know, you were part, you know, like all the TLU stuff this summer and everything. I mean, there's just, you know, I'm sure that's going to all bubble up again around Game Awards, right? And it's sort of like, you know, does it deserve to be nominated or not? And it's just like, you know, I think all the discourse and discussion is really good and important to have. I just think when it kind of blends into stuff that's so personal and toxic, that's where I worry about. This is
Totally.
a general comment on games in general. It's just like, it's hard because it's just not very inclusive and welcoming to people into this community. And it's like, look, it's okay to have a favorite gaming system. Like there's nothing wrong with that. It's
Sure.
like, it's like, and that's just like, like I tend to like, last generation I played, or this current generation, it's like I tend to play mostly on PlayStation, and that's just like, that's okay. I still have an Xbox. I love their games, and it's like, it's all good. But like inevitably, like before that, I played mostly on my 360, and that was my platform. And it's like, things can evolve and change, and it's just, it's this idea, as you said, like Insomniac is entitled to like, change Peter Parker if they want to, and it's like, it's just, yeah. And then I saw like, Brian had to write a letter like to people on Twitter, and it's just like, it's that's the world we live in. And I love that there's so much passion and care around this stuff. And I think it's good to have these debates, but yeah, it's tough. I mean, these developers are already working under such extreme conditions to like finish these games.
Yep.
And then it's sort of like on top of that, it's like, there's always drama around this stuff. And that's why, Fall Guys was just fun. And like,
I mean, it's back to what we talked about at the top of the show, right? Of like you with Game Awards, but like a developer working on a game for 3 years, 4 years, 6 years, and you finally release it. And we all know it. When we do anything on the internet, you can get 100 positive comments, but the one negative comment's the one you get hung up on. And so, for it to be this, like, ugh.
And that was, when I was a young kid visiting like id, in 1993 when they were shipping Doom, and Will Wright when he was doing Sim Farm, I think that was like in 1994. And it's like, what really made me want to make games my career was like spending time with these developers and seeing how much passion they have to entertain us and how hard they work. And it's a lot like, your Game Awards speech. It's like, all these folks, they're just so talented. And that really is, when I was a kid, I wanted to celebrate that, and I loved games, and I wanted to know how they were made. And everything I've done since then has kind of been just an extension of that belief when I was a kid, that like gaming is the most powerful form of entertainment, and the people that make these games are some of the smartest, most artistic, creative folks in the world, and we deserve to like recognize them.
Hell yeah, Geoff Keighley.
Hell yeah, Craig Miller.
Jeff, thank you for being one of our cool friends.
Thanks for having me on, Miller. Do we cover everything we needed to cover?
I could talk to you forever. You know that. So no, impossible. But for right now, for the Game Awards for 2020, I think we did a pretty good job. Yeah,
well, we're looking forward to a fun couple months ahead. And I think it's going to be a good show. And I'm sure you guys will have, I'm excited because I'm sure, you and everyone will be doing co-streams this year.
Oh, yeah. We never miss that. We love that.
The in-person aspect of everyone being there, but I also think it's going to mean there's going to be that many more co-streams of literally everyone like watching the show and reacting live. So I think your co-stream with, what was it, the Joker reveal with the water, right? That was like a famous
where Tim jumps off and knocks over a beer and ruins Andy's laptop. Yeah, of course, lest we forget.
I was gonna say, so hopefully I don't know what we're gonna do this year, but if we could hit that level, then we know.
I'd prefer not to, because we're all working from home, so those are personal equipments now we'd be destroying, so we don't want to do that. All right, Jeff.
Well, that's a high bar to hit, and we've had and topping the Xbox reveal last year is going to be hard.
Tough, so, PlayStation Vita 2. I'm just putting it out there. Reveal that.
Well, we'll see. Anything is possible, Miller.
All right, cool. Jeff, in case people don't know, when are the Game Awards this year?
Game Awards are happening on Thursday, December the 10th, live everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of We Have Cool Friends. Remember, it posts each and every Tuesday, youtube.com/kindafunny, podcast services around the globe. And until next time, it's been our pleasure to serve you.